Allison Cohen, Lady Law from Cohen Law Services, and the host of Legalese. You're listening to News Radio 580 AM, 94.9 FM, Worcester's news, weather, and traffic station. So glad you tuned in this Saturday morning. We have an amazing show. I'm very excited. You know, I say each week, folks, on the show, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Well, I can tell you that when it comes to the Legalese show today, due to the effort of many, we have planned a show that should be heard by everybody and will be remembered for a long time. The guests that I have in studio today are extremely influential in terms of the autism awareness movement, autism treatment, autism acceptance. And I've been part of that for over a year, and everybody who listens to the show knows that I have been vested in the special needs community. I have a little girl who has Down syndrome. She's also legally blind. And so it's been part of my mission to bring to folks knowledge, because we say each week, knowledge is power. That's how you educate. That's how you advocate for yourselves and for others. So it's an honor and it's a privilege to be here today. I want to just give a couple of statistics about autism. And I've said this many times on the show, but it's worth repeating. So 1 in 68 children are diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. Prevalence of autism in the United States has increased by 119% from the year 2000, when it was 1 in 150, to the year 2010, to where it's now 1 in 68. To raise a child with autism, the average cost annually is $60,000 a year. Boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. 40% of children with autism are nonverbal, and 35% of young adults ages 19 to 23 with autism have not had a job or received postgraduate education after leaving high school. In addition, folks, autism is the fastest growing developmental disability in the world, and it's the most underfunded in terms of research. So when the powers that be at iHeartMedia knew the importance of this show, they reached out to me and offered me a 2-hour on-air program so that we can properly interview each of these important guests. So without further ado, I'm going to give you some brief background on each guest. If you have a question, 508-755-0058. Again, you're listening to Legalese with Lady Law. And let the cross-examination begin, folks. I'm just kidding. Okay, so to my immediate left, I have Dr. Julie Vargas. She is a return guest to my program, but more importantly, she's the daughter of B.F. Skinner, who was the most prominent psychologist of the 20th century. Dr. Vargas is the head of the B.F. Skinner Foundation. She's a published author. And for 37 years, Julie has taught teachers and prospective teachers how to use the science of behavior to help students learn through positive reinforcement. So questions for Doc Julie today will focus on the importance of using science, data, and reproducible evidence when deciding on procedures for behavioral problems associated with autism. So I want to welcome you back to the program, Julie.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Now, sitting next to Julie Vargas is Scott Badash. He's president and CEO of the Autism Society of America. For those of you who have not heard about the Autism Society of America, it's the country's oldest organization within the autism community. Scott is a father of a young adult with autism, and before joining the national office in 2010 as Senior Vice President of Development and Operations, Scott led his local Autism Society affiliate. Scott has more than 30 years of experience in nonprofit organizations, particularly in fundraising, which is incredibly important since, as I mentioned a moment ago, autism is the fastest growing developmental disability in the world, and yet the most underfunded in terms of research. So Scott, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Glad to have you today.
Glad to be here.
So now, sitting to my right is Russell Lehman. Russell is an award-winning and internationally recognized motivational speaker. He is a poet, an author, and an advocate whose words have reached over 15 million people worldwide, from Argentina to Norway, Lebanon to Australia. Russell happens to have autism. He also sits on the Nevada Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities. He's a board member for the Autism Coalition of Nevada, while also chairing their statewide youth advisory committee. Russell spreads awareness and acceptance about autism from coast to coast. How? Well, by giving inspiration and hope, but by erasing the stigma and stereotypes that comes with having a disability. So I want to thank you very much, Russell, for being part of the show today.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start with the questions, and I hope you guys are prepared, because Took me quite some time to figure these out. Scott, I'm going to start with you. Bernard Rimland is the founder of the Autism Society of America. Founded your organization in 1965, and it is the oldest and largest grassroots organization within the autism community. Now, a year before Rimland founded the organization, he wrote a book about autism, and he was influenced by B.F. Skinner's work. B.F. Skinner, Burris Frederick Skinner, of course, we all know, is a psychologist, a behaviorist. He was an author, and he did many other things, but he was known for examining behavior patterns. And specifically, Skinner believed that the goal of the science of psychology was to predict one's behavior and to control one's behavior. And how did he do that? Well, from current stimulus situations and the history of reinforcement, pretty much what I believe we have come to know in the autism world as applied behavior analysis. So here we are 52 years later, Scott, after your organization was first founded. And the question that I have is this: how is the Autism Society of America's approach to understanding autism and its treatment changed or not changed over time?
Well, it's a great question. It's changed drastically. I mean, it changes every day. I mean, because every day there's new treatment, there's new approaches, new sciences. But what hasn't changed is we were founded based on the concept of options, so that no one type of treatment or intervention or plan is going to be the perfect plan for everyone. So what the reason we were started was at the time in 1965 when a parent was told their son, and it usually was their son, it wasn't their daughter
Right.
at the time, that there was autism. The only really option was institutionalization.
Right.
And we have courageous parents come together and say no, and Bernie was one of them. Ruth Sullivan, who's still alive, 90-some years old. She'll get mad at me if I said that, I guess. But
God bless her.
God
That's
bless her,
right. Yeah.
But so the idea of behaviors, since 1965, there's different options. And what we strive to do is we know that the parent, and it comes a time when the individual with autism will make the best decision. So our job is to get them the best information. So if a young parent calls us today, we have a call center, and says, my son or daughter was just diagnosed, what's the next step? We'll have our trained people start working with them and say, here's various options. The other issue is a lot of behavior and a lot of type of treatment isn't available universally around the country. It's some states insurance pays for it, so where an option may exist in one state or even one community, it may not be existing in another. So we're constantly adapting that and working on how best to do that.
Right. I think that insurance coverage piece is very important. Obviously, in Massachusetts, with the WICA being passed and allowing applied behavior analysis to be part of treatments that were paid for by insurance, but it varies significantly from state to state. So let me turn to Julie for a second. Dr. Julie, your father, B.F. Skinner, believed that behavior could be controlled systematically to bring about a desired result. Now, autism spectrum disorders are characterized by several things. And so when I was researching this, it seems that the prevalence or the difficulties that occur are in communication, in social interaction, in problems with reasoning and regulating emotions. And some of these behaviors of children with autism can include repetitive behaviors, or like crying or having outbursts in inappropriate situations, potentially being physically aggressive, or other self-destructive behaviors like self-biting, head banging, hair pulling. So, here's my question, Julie. Based on yours and your father's research, how can the scientific method of applied behavior analysis systematically improve behavior when the degree and the severity of the symptoms is different from child to child? Like Nassim Audi says, if you've met one child with autism, then you've met one child with autism.
Yes, that's a very good question. The whole idea of science is to solve problems. And the science that my father started really worked with individuals. It recognized that every individual is different, but that some principles apply to all people. And the thing that he did was to show that most of our behavior, most of our daily talking, especially communication,
Right.
is what he called operant behavior, and that is not controlled by a stimulus. It's not a reflex reaction to an antecedent stimulus that comes before, but it's under control of the kinds of effects the actions have on the world. And that's terribly important, because that if you want to change behavior, you have to look, well, what kinds of effects is this tantrum producing?
Right.
And you have to, we do what they call a functional analysis. What is the action producing? So what you do is you analyze for that particular kid in that particular situation, and you see, well, what alternative behaviors would produce similar kinds of consequences, or can you design an environment so that the upsetting events that maybe triggered it are not there, that you can shape alternative behavior so that essentially what you're doing is you're enabling the child with autism to control their own environment to produce positive effects, instead of having to go through really maladaptive behavior to get anybody to pay attention.
Brilliant, Julie. I knew you were bringing your A game today, Julie, and I've got some good questions coming up, but we're up against a break, and when I get back, I have a wonderful question that I have posed, and it will be posed for Russell Lehman. I'm excited to talk to him, so folks, please don't go anywhere. There's so much more to come. You're listening to News Radio 580 AM, 94.9 FM, Worcester's news, weather, traffic station, legalese. Attorney Allison Cohen will be right back.